Introduction: How to be happier. A single molecule governs all facets of your life. Dopamine is a miracle molecule that has extraordinary effects on your thoughts and behavior. By understanding its role, you will be able to become happier. In this book, you will learn: how is dopamine created? How does dopamine make us crazy in love? Why is it hard to stop using drugs? How can our brain counteract dopamine? How is dopamine one of the causes of schizophrenia? How does dopamine influence your political beliefs? How can you be fully happy with dopamine? Our answers to these questions are easy to understand, simple to implement, and quick to execute. Ready to be happier? Let's go. How is dopamine created? Dopamine is nicknamed the pleasure molecule because it's what people feel when this substance is released in the brain. But beyond pleasure, dopamine is also released when we encounter new, unexpected, and exciting things. And our euphoria is at its peak when we are confronted with a better outcome than we expected. The bigger the difference, the greater the pleasure. For example, when you check your bank account and you have more money than you thought, then this unexpected news will make you euphoric. Moreover, dopamine is there to push us to achieve new goals in order to stay alive. In fact, our brains divide the world into two categories. The near category is everything we can touch, see, and smell, and the distant category, everything that is out of our immediate reach. From an evolutionary point of view, this makes sense. After all, the food we have is already there. It's the food we don't have that will decide our life or death. How does dopamine make us crazy in love? The euphoria of a new romance lasts only 12 to 18 months. After that, many couples begin to feel a lack of love in their relationship. In fact, it's the dopamine that's missing. Since dopamine always demands new, brighter, and better things, some people break up and move on to another lover or fantasize about the thrill of a new romance. Fortunately, building a relationship is not in vain. After a while, passionate love turns into companionship. We enjoy each other's company. Companionship is not based on dopamine, but on serotonin, endorphins, oxytocin, and endocannabinoids. These substances allow us to enjoy things in the moment. Why is it difficult to stop using drugs? Wanting something is not the same as actually liking it, because our brain uses two different systems to produce our desire and pleasure. Our desire circuit is driven by dopamine. It makes us want things, but doesn't really care if we end up liking the object of our desires and if it's good for us in the long run. Drugs such as alcohol, cocaine, and opioids release a more intense dose of dopamine, which creates a high probability of addiction because they stay in our memory. From an evolutionary perspective, if you come across a bush full of tasty berries, you will remember the pleasant surprise and be more likely to seek out a similar bush in the future. Even after quitting a drug, the risk of relapse is due to our memory. The three main triggers are people, places, and things. How can our brain counteract dopamine? The dopamine control circuit is a system in our brain that controls our desires, and this circuit is also powered by dopamine. This system works with our frontal lobes to plan and strategize for the future. So desire dopamine makes us want things and control dopamine helps us get them. For example, desire dopamine makes us want to buy a car and control dopamine helps us compare prices and features of different vehicles. Without this control, your desire would drive you to the first dealership and buy the first car you saw. We all have a more or less active control system. People with a less active dopamine control system have difficulty suppressing cravings and distractions and staying focused. Conversely, people with a highly active dopamine control system tend to be intellectual, ambitious, and successful. They are also less emotional, which means they keep a cool head in stressful situations. But this control prevents them from fully enjoying the present moment. How is dopamine one of the causes of schizophrenia? The dopamine of desire allows us to think outside the box, make new connections, and become creative. Artists, musicians, and writers tend to have brains rich in dopamine because it allows them to think in new and unconventional ways. But if the dopamine control circuit doesn't regulate the desire for dopamine, we will have hallucinations, delusions, and obsessive-compulsive disorders. People with these symptoms are often diagnosed with schizophrenia or bipolar disorder. In addition, everyone has had these experiences. When we sleep, we can have strange dreams because the desire for dopamine becomes very active and is less controlled. How does dopamine influence your political beliefs? According to one study, liberals tend to be impulsive, authoritarian, and novelty-seeking, a personality found in people with very high dopamine activity. Conservatives tend to be charitable, social, and more concerned with the present moment, a personality found in people with lower dopamine activity. Thus, conservatives prefer practical solutions to the abstract plans of liberals and are suspicious of novelty. This is why there are conflicts between them. Finally, our political views, like our brain chemistry, are not fixed and change over time. How to be fully happy thanks to dopamine. For thousands of years, dopamine has been a crucial element for our survival. But in our modern society, wanting more is not always better. For example, wanting to consume more and more leads to a terrifying climate change. Our brain itself was not designed to make us happy but to keep us alive. To be happy, we need to find a balance. Step out of the endless dopamine stimulation and make a conscious effort to engage in a more peaceful and elusive present moment endeavor. To do this, find a hobby such as sports, cooking, gardening, or crafts, in itself a project with sensory input from a progressive perspective. Conclusion: dopamine is a chemical in our brain that plays an important role in our lives. The more dopamine we have, the more likely we are to seek out novelty, take risks, and be curious. But too much dopamine gets in the way of your happiness. In this sense, find a balance, such as a hobby that combines sensory input with a perspective of progression. If you like the summary, click on one of our partner links to discover the molecule of more. How a single chemical in your brain drives love, sex, and creativity, and will determine the fate of the human race by Daniel Z. Lieberman. Michael E. Long, an ebook, book or audiobook format. And if you're not interested in reading further, we recommend you discover Rewire, Change Your Brain to Break Bad Habits. Overcome Addictions, Conquer Self-Destructive Behavior by Richard O'Connor. Introduction: How to Stop a Bad Habit. We all automatically do things that we regret after we do them. By understanding how the brain works when we perform involuntary actions, you will be able to reverse the trend and stop a bad habit. In this book, you will learn: how does our brain dictate our behavior, how the brain has the ability to reinforce your conscious self, how to become aware of an unwanted habit, why do our emotions cause us to engage in undesirable behavior, how can you avoid falling back into an undesirable habit, how can you strengthen your willpower to end an undesirable habit. Our answers to these questions are easy to understand, simple to implement, and quick to execute. Ready to stop a bad habit? Let's go.